Oh, welcome to another edition of Howling with the Wolf. It's Brocktober Fest. Let's Brock and roll. We'll have more bad Brock puns throughout the episode. Osweiler edition of the Miami Dolphins coming forward. They just won an upset win over the Chicago Bears. Thanks in part to a big Brock revival. Better one in my head than it was actually coming through. So it's been a interesting week for the Miami Dolphins. Thanks for joining Howling with the Wolf. I'm Cameron Wolfe, ESPN's Dolphins and NFL reporter. I want to be able to chat with you about plenty of Dolphins topics, a few NFL topics, and just some general overall football talk that you guys want to talk about. We're going to have some fun over this chat. I'm going to start kicking it off talking about Ryan Tannehill and Brock Osweiler. Hopefully providing you with some nuggets that you did not know about Ryan Tannehill's injury and what you should know about Brock Osweiler and whether he'll continue this festive period of our Brocktoberfest this week against the Detroit Lions. Thursday Night Football is coming up in a few minutes for football fans. One of the former teams I used to cover, the Denver Broncos, are about to play off, so I always enjoy seeing the Broncos, the Titans, teams that I cover and still have players that I know out there and that I talk to regularly and see how those guys doing. So after this, I'll go ahead and run to that. But in the meantime, I hope I have you guys' attention. Please subscribe, share this page with your friends, like my page. We'll continue to do this every week, hopefully giving you guys some background info on what's going on in the NFL and with the Dolphins. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and get you to what I know about Ryan Tannehill. For Dolphins fans, for people who want to know, Ryan Tannehill is not going to play this week, as Adam Gase already revealed. I reported yesterday and into today that the plan is that Ryan Tannehill most likely will not play next week against the Houston Texans as well. Rest has been the plan for him. This is a shoulder injury. The thought that it may be something involving his rotator cuff or soreness or sprain involving that right throwing shoulder. I actually asked Adam Gase today whether it was similar to an Andrew Luck injury. Last season, we saw Andrew Luck deal with on and off that shoulder injury that ended up costing him, pretty much 2 years. And that's the worry anytime you hear unusual shoulder injury in regarding to a quarterback. Adam Gase quickly shot that down. From what I understand, they are aiming for that November 4th time possibility against the Jets. It may be a reasonable return date if everything goes right. Obviously, we haven't seen Ryan Tannehill throw so far, and I don't think we'll see him throw on Friday when they practice. So, the best bet is that he takes those 10 days in between the Houston game and the New York Jets game and rest and things go well as far as how he responds, and then he's fully able to go. The big thing is not necessarily the throwing, it's the response to the throwing. They don't want inflammation in his arm. They don't want him to be irritated. They don't want him to, all of a sudden be throwing and then not have something work the way it works. So everything we've heard is that they intend for him to come back this season and they intend for him to be the starter this season. But it's going to be pretty good chance that we'll see Brocktober through the rest of October. I don't believe we'll see any Tannehill until November at the earliest. So that is sort of your Ryan Tannehill update. I think that it's we've seen him at practice. He actually caught a pass from Brock Osweiler today. He ended up going through some light ball security drills. He ended up being able to hand the ball off to running backs, but he hasn't thrown yet. So for people who are looking long term with the Miami Dolphins, I think there's going to be a lot of question marks regarding what this means for Ryan Tannehill's future. And I want to talk about that a little later in the episode. I want to quickly talk about Brock Osweiler. I'm going to answer a few of your questions that you came in with, and then we'll jump back over into Ryan Tannehill's long-term future here in Miami. I think one thing that I wanted to get to really quickly is that Brock Osweiler talked in depth today about actually earlier this week, Wednesday, about his time in Denver. And, I actually spent time with Brock in Denver. It's one of the few relationships I had with the guys before I got here. So I knew Brock. I knew sort of his waiting spectrum. And we talked about this GIF. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it on Twitter. If you're on Twitter or if you've seen it on social media, you know which one I'm talking about immediately. There's a GIF of Brock Osweiler when he was with Denver in 2014. He's about to come into a game, and Peyton Manning is up 31. He's about to leave the game. And Brock comes in, grabs his helmet like he's about to go run on the field, and he turns around and he throws his hand up because Peyton's back out on the field. And that really encapsulates what Brock had to deal with, I guess, those 4 years in Denver. Peyton, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, is not going to lead any room for anybody to come get extra snaps. Hey, Jenna, how you doing? That's just not who Peyton was. Peyton had already dealt with that a lot in Indianapolis, where he sat out snaps, so he didn't want to do that again. So this year, when he was there in Denver, there was a lot of periods where Brock had to wait, and he said that he counted 58 games that Adam Gase called between Denver and Miami that was for Peyton, for somebody else that wasn't him. And he just patiently waited, got frustrated, and last Sunday was the first time he didn't get frustrated. Last Sunday was the first time that he got to actually experience and listen to a game from Adam Gase that mattered for him. So he was kind of emotional about that, and I thought that was a pretty raw side of football that we don't often see. We kind of see the macho, here and there, but Brock feeling emotions about the guy who drafted him or helped draft him finally getting to call a game for him. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that that element of the week added some nuance to a week that has been full of Brock puns. So will we see another Brocktober festivities? I don't think we will. The Detroit Lions have been really productive against the pass this week. I think that it's more likely that we see a heavy Frank Gore and King and Drake spell from their running backs against the 30th ranked Detroit Lions defense. But I do think that Brock Osweiler's comfort with Adam Gase is going to really help him as they go about these next few weeks. So I see you, Adam. My favorite beat writer, of course, is Adam Beasley, Miami Herald. He's, of course, the best Miami Dolphins beat reporter. But Perk, I love him as well. And I think that Perk came out of the womb bald. So I think that's how he was made. I do think that I want to answer a few questions that people have sent in before, and then we'll get back to some more Ryan Tannehill, Brock Osweiler talk. And then for those who aren't Dolphins fans, we'll talk a little bit of NFL. I have a couple questions about just what I think about a few other teams, so I'm going to go ahead and answer those as well. But the first question I had coming in was from Carwell Augustus. It was a Dolphins question. He asked, is there any chance the Dolphins make a move around the trade deadline? We're about 2 weeks out from the trade deadline. I think it's the week of October 30th, so about 2 weeks out from that. My thought is that there obviously will be some conversations. I think the biggest name on the Dolphins roster that you may look for is Devontae Parker. The Dolphins have said that they do not intend to trade him, but deadline spur action, and we've seen him not have a big role in the Dolphins offense over the last few weeks due to injury and due to other players playing well. So I think this week will be really telling. But Devontae Parker, Carwell will be the name that I think you should watch for. As far as people coming in, they're starting to get healthy, so there's not as big of holes as we may have thought maybe a few weeks ago. If they find somebody in the interior of the offensive line they feel that can help them competition-wise, maybe they'll look into that. They're a little light. They're a little light on cornerbacks, so that would be the one position where I would target. We saw last week Torrey McTyer got burnt toast on several occasions by Turbo Taylor Gabriel out there in Chicago. So I think they're in a position where one cornerback injury, like they saw to Bobby McCain last week, could really hurt them long term. So I think that would be an area I would target on trade deadline. And then as a player I look for on the other side, I would say that, like I mentioned, Devontae Parker. Another question from Luis Velasquez. He is asking about, do I foresee an NFL team in London? I saw earlier today that the Jacksonville Jaguars pulled out on their bid to buy the Wembley Stadium, their owner specifically, Shahid Khan, or Shad Khan. I think that's the correct way to say it. Don't quote me on that. But I think that was interesting because I thought Jacksonville was always the team that could have been most conducive to going to London because they go there seemingly every year, and they seem to have a lot of ties to that fan base. Them pulling out makes me think there's something going on, whether it's financial or whether there's something with Wembley Stadium. I know the NFL wants to put their footprint there, but the problem always with the team in London is figuring out the logistics of travel. It's already a hassle for teams. They hate doing the London trip because of what it requires and changing their game plan. Teams have to leave on Thursday sometimes for a Sunday night game or a Sunday day game. So it's not really conducive for road teams. And then as a home team, you're going to have to travel eight times out of the year and had that type of stresses on your team. So if the money makes sense, it's always a possibility, but I don't really foresee that happening in the near future. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit more. Best thing I saw this week, and then I'm going to talk some more Ryan Tannehill and Brock Osweiler. As always, guys, if you guys have any questions, fire them away on the chat forum. I see you, Jake, coming to Tennessee. I've been watching what's going on with the Titans. I've been talking to a few guys on their team. For those who follow me from the Tennessee days, thank you. I love y'all still. And I always love to root for players and stories. So I have some people that I know on that team, so I'm rooting for them to do well. So let's see. The last question is Vontaze Burfict. Should he be suspended? I don't know if you guys saw earlier this week, but Vontaze Burfict had quite a few questionable hits, and I'll be friendly with that questionable hit. There was a video that came out that maybe he was calling out Juju Smith-Schuster and saying that he's next. I grew up playing football and I love hitting and I love all physicality, but there's no place in the game for what we've got from Vontaze Burfict. He's a repeat offender. He's a guy that doesn't seem to be disciplined to the right extent from the NFL. So I definitely think that he's a guy that should be suspended seriously, for these sort of things. And the NFL's got to sit down and say, hey, do we want to have this type of player in the league? If you're truly treating safety as something that's important, you've got to set the boundaries with guys who are not towing the line with clean hits as far as helmet to helmet as quarterbacks hit. You got to draw the line with the guys with guys who are recklessly taking a chance and harming people long term. So I'd really have a long conversation about whether Vontaze Burfict deserves to be in this league. So that's just my thoughts on that. I have a few questions. I'm gonna go with you guys on the chat. Is Tannehill actually hurt? Yes. I do not know if he can pick up his kids still and Stella, but I can tell you that shoulder is actually hurt. This is not a ploy. I saw some of the conspiracy theories. Adam Gase is not trying to bench Ryan Tannehill by putting Brock Osweiler in. I promise that is not the plan. Adam Gase actually really does like Ryan Tannehill. He's really adamant that he's going to be the starter. I've seen a lot of conspiracy theories. Ryan Tannehill's hurt. We don't know exactly what the injury is at this point, whether it's, if it's a partial tear, if it's something going on with the labrum or the rotator cuff, but he's not there. He's not faking, and the Dolphins aren't faking this. So you can believe it if you want, but there's no conspiracy here. Let's see what we got here. Tyler is asking the impact with Chase Allen hitting the IR. Yes, we actually didn't talk about this with Gase much today because quarterback news took priority. But Chase Allen went on IR. He was their number 4 linebacker. Sorry if I'm in the weeds for people. With Dolphins news, but Chase Allen was the number 4 linebacker. So what it's going to do is it's going to create Stephon Anthony to move up into that number 4 spot. He's a guy who's first round pick from New Orleans about 5 years back. So he has the talent, has the potential, but hasn't really shown it much since he's been in Miami. So it really puts a lot more pressure on him to contribute in the defensive role. He hadn't seen many defensive snaps. Chase Allen was really an underrated player. He was splitting snaps with Jerome Baker at one point early in the season as far as that third linebacker rep before Jerome Baker started to separate. Chase Allen's also a good special teams player. So it's going to hurt the Dolphins in multiple ways, but maybe most importantly, it's going to hurt their depth. They're now one linebacker injury away from being in some serious trouble. Martrell Spate is now their number 5 linebacker. I talked to him in the locker room today, and he said he's still trying to figure out where he is with the playbook. He's still trying to pick it up. But he hopes to be in a position to help on defense at one point. But they signed him to be a special teams player primarily. So you're getting a little bit deeper in the weeds. Once you lose a guy like Chase Allen, you start to get into a Martrell Spate. Mike Hull is going to be designated from IR probably sometime in the next couple of weeks, and he's going to be a guy that can help you maybe in that capacity. So Angelo Jordan is saying O'Leary seems legit. Thoughts? Dow Loggins talked about the legend of Nick O'Leary. A few fun facts about Nick O'Leary. He is the grandson, I think his grandson, of Jack Nicklaus. And Jack Nicklaus was actually at the game. Don't quote me on the actual relation, but I know their family. And I think it's the grandson of Jack Nicklaus. And he was at the game. They hung out after the game. He has really good bloodlines. Apparently Buffalo didn't want him for some reason, and he's immediately stepped up and playing a starter role on this Miami offense. He's out playing Mike Gesicki, and that it is a little disappointing for your second round pick to not be outplayed from a guy who was on the street a few weeks ago. But tight end is notoriously one of the slowest positions to transition from college to the NFL. So I wouldn't go ahead and get the bust label out on Mike Gesicki yet, but Nick O'Leary has immediately made himself a player in this offense, and I think he's allowed Adam Gase to have more two tight end sets in this offense because he has comfort in what Nick O'Leary can do as an H-back, as a tight end, as a blocker, as a receiver, and we've seen that particularly last week where he got a touchdown and a few huge grabs and created himself as a safety valve for Brock Osweiler. So let's see where I see. Hey, how you doing, Paula? Jenna. Brocktober really is a thing, and that's going to create a great transition point for me to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Brock and Ryan Tannehill transition this season and into the future. And then I'll go ahead and go back to a few of you guys' questions. As always, just keep churning them through. If I miss them immediately, I'll try to get back with them at some point before the end of the show. So Brocktober is a thing, Jenna. And it's funny enough, Jenna Lane is the Tampa Bay Bucks ESPN reporter. Really great at her job, and she had a similar situation with Fitzmagic early this season. And I get the feel that the Dolphins are having their own version of Fitzmagic. You don't know when Brocktober is going to expire. Is it just a one-game thing? Does it last through October? We were talking to Media Room today. What happens in November? Does Brocktober, does the pumpkin expire? What happens? Do you go Brocksgiving, Broxmas? Where does this whole thing end? Right now, I actually asked Brock on Wednesday, what's his favorite Brock pun? He said, we're in Brocktober right now. So that's where we are. And that's his favorite one. So first of all, Brocktober is going to last most likely through the rest of October, like I mentioned earlier in the episode regarding Ryan Tannehill's injury. And as far as it being a thing, he threw for a career-high 380 passing yards, although Albert Wilson deserves a big bit of credit from those plays. And I do think that at some point we realize that Brock Osweiler is Brock Osweiler. So I don't know if it happens this week. I don't know if it happens in a few weeks. But I think the Dolphins are going to ride that wave until it comes up. So that's why I don't think that there's any credence to Brock can play his way into a starting role. I think Ryan Tannehill is clearly the more talented quarterback and the guy who's the guy here. But I am a little worried about long-term with Ryan Tannehill, mostly because he's a 30-year-old quarterback. This is his seventh year. We talk a lot about potential with guys. He's 30. There's probably no more potential. He is who he is. I know the Dolphins have waited for years, to try to figure out, is he the guy? And every time they try to get a really good gauge, he gets hurt. 2016, he had a really good year. 2017, he tears his ACL. You got to bring in Jay Cutler. You've got all this wild stuff happening. Hurricane. You got a coach snorting cocaine. Everything went wrong for them last year, and then they bring him back. This is supposed to be the year that everything goes right for him. Back with Adam Gase, playoff year, and then he gets hurt. So I don't want to throw the book out on him yet because he could come back in November. Brock can keep him afloat, and then Ryan Tannehill could lead him in the playoffs, and then you're in a situation where maybe you decide, hey, we bring him back. But I think he's really at a point where, we may have seen enough from Ryan Tannehill to say, okay, if he's not the guy who is. And I think that, you start looking at his salary, you start looking at his cap hit, and you have to say, okay, maybe we have to find our quarterback of the future if Ryan Tannehill, one, can't prove that he is that guy, and he hasn't yet. He hasn't proved that he's not that guy, but he hasn't proved that he is that guy. And two, can we count on him to be the quarterback that leads us to a championship? If not, we've got to find that person, and that usually starts with the draft. Franchise quarterbacks typically don't come in free agency. Unlike the situation with Kirk Cousins this past offseason, I don't think that's going to happen this offseason. So you have to look and say, if Ryan Tannehill is going to continue to get hurt, and I think he's missed maybe 20 games, I believe, in the last, since 2016. So you're in a situation where your quarterback isn't available. Your quarterback has been on and off with his consistency. I think you're really at a crossroads where I think that Mike Tannenbaum, Chris Greer, Adam Gase will have to sit down after this offseason and see how it goes and say, hey, can we commit to another year of not drafting the quarterback high? And I think that's ultimately what they're going to have to do. Whether they bring Ryan Tannehill back in 2019 or not is probably going to be dependent on how he ends this year. But I think regardless of how he plays, unless he lights it up and makes a Pro Bowl and does all this crazy stuff, I think you have to draft a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. I'm always of the proponent you draft a quarterback every single year. I don't know why coaches don't do it, but I think they need to draft one high, maybe even first round high, because as we've seen, this is a quarterback league, and we hadn't seen enough from Ryan Tannehill through year 7 to show that he's the guy who can lead them there. So to be determined whether Ryan Tannehill is back in 2019, but I do think that we have started to see enough where maybe they need to start planning for a scenario where he's not the quarterback of the future. Let's see. I'll go a few more of you guys' questions. I'm going to have my prediction at the end of the show, give you X factors for this game, and I am going to, I think that's it. So, let's see what we got here. Felipe, what's up, man? How you doing? Felipe? Marquise Johnson, thoughts on the Ravens defense? Monsters. I actually do plug here. I actually do a weekly segment called Who Was That? Unheralded Ballers every week for ESPN.com that comes out on Tuesdays. And one of the players that ended up making my list this week was Zadarius Smith, the defensive end from the Ravens, who had 3 sacks against the Titans. They actually had 11 sacks. 11 sacks the Ravens had against the Titans. And I was worried about Marcus Mariota's safety. I covered the Titans. I know that he has a history of injuries, and that Ravens game couldn't have been good for his bones. I don't really know what was going on, but that Ravens defense is a maniac, and they shut out the Titans. And I think that we should really start respecting the Ravens as one of the best teams in the NFL. Maybe they aren't top 1, top 2, top 3, but I think they're one of the teams that you don't want to see any time of the year, whether it's September, December, or January. And I think they're a team that could play the Patriots and knock them off. And that's what you're looking for at this time of year. Who's a team that's not going to be afraid of the big bad Patriots of the AFC? And I think you look at teams like the Ravens, possibly the Chiefs, as 2 teams that stand out that could be somebody that could challenge the Patriots in the AFC. And let's go. That takes me to another question from Luis Velasquez, who was asking, who are my top 3 and bottom 3 teams in the NFL so far? Very good question. I think that my top 2 are going to be, or top 3 are going to be pretty straightforward. The 3 teams that I've been most impressed with this season, and that I think have the best chance of long-term future, is number 1, the LA Rams. Sean McVay has been killing it out there. They are the last undefeated team remaining, and they have it all offensively, and they have a good bit of it defensively. So I've been really impressed with what I've seen from them. Todd Gurley has played like an MVP candidate. They have even been banged up on the corners with Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters, and they still played extremely well. So I think that's a team that it's going to be really tough for the NFC to compete with come playoff time. So I'd say that's probably my number 1 team. Number 2 has got to be the Patriots. They came out and beat the Chiefs in Foxborough this past weekend, what was a great game, and the Chiefs are my number 3. I think even though they lost and they fell from the undefeateds, I think they proved that Patrick Mahomes, as I like to call him, makes this Chiefs team different than previous years. I know we've had the Chiefs in previous years where they get really hot and we're like, oh, the Chiefs, they're cold. And then all of a sudden they're 8-8 by the end of the year. You're like, what happened? Or last year they lose to the Titans in the first round of the playoffs, and you're like, oh, same old Chiefs. But I think this Patrick Mahomes dude is really special, and I think they've shown their chops of why they should be in the NFL. Those are my top 3. Bottom 3. One of those teams are playing tonight. The Arizona Cardinals are the worst team of football to me. I think that they have shown very little offensive creativity. David Johnson hasn't shown any type of things that he showed before the injury. I think some of that is the coaching staff, and I think there are a lot of issues here on that team, and it seems like they're wasting Larry Fitzgerald the rest of his career. So very disappointed in the Arizona Cardinals. They're the bottom tier. Oakland Raiders, they almost were the worst team, and if they keep playing like they are, they're gonna be the bottom dwellers. John Gruden what is John Gruden doing? I actually know John Gruden from our ESPN days, but maybe he should have stayed in the booth because things are not looking well. He's got the oldest roster in the NFL. They traded away Khalil Mack. Derek Carr went from looking like a franchise quarterback to a guy that needs to be replaced at the end of the year. They can't find Amari Cooper. There are more issues with the Raiders than I have enough time to talk about on this chat. It's just puzzling. I don't know what's going on with that franchise. I'd imagine that Reggie McKenzie, the GM there, this could be his last year, whether voluntary or involuntary. There seems to be some issues there. It's just head shaking to see what happened with the Oakland Raiders team that people thought could be a playoff contender, and now they're probably going to be competing for a top 3 draft pick. And the third worst team is the New York Giants. It's crazy, and I talked about this on Twitter last week about how they can have a top 10 playmaker at receiver, a top 10 playmaker at running back, and arguably top 5 for each of those positions, and Odell Beckham Jr. and Saquon Barkley, and still be one of the worst teams of football. That shows the importance of the quarterback position. Eli Manning is toast. He is done. He should have been replaced last season like they tried to, and they are not going to be able to make the playoffs ever again under Eli Manning. It's about time to go ahead and call it quits. Little Manning, watch how your brother went out. It's not going to end that same way for Eli. And I think the Giants are starting to realize they made a big mistake by not replacing Eli. So those are my bottom 3 teams. Let's see what we got here. Greg is saying, can we get our hopes up to see Cam Wake back this week? Our D-line core is thin. Good news regarding Cam Wake and cornerback Bobby McCain. I'm expecting Bobby McCain to play, and it's leaning towards Cam Wake playing as well. So the thought is that there's probably going to be 2 starters back on defense for the Dolphins this week. Cam Wake's a little further behind than Bobby McCain. Both of them have practiced in a limited capacity this week. And Cam Wake, obviously had that knee scope as my colleague Adam Schefter reported earlier this week. And he is ready to, attack again. So him and Robert Quinn back on the defensive end front is going to create a lot of havoc for the Detroit Lions. They haven't had really good sack numbers this year. The Dolphins haven't, but they've been able to get some pass rush throughout the way. So I think it'll be good for him to get back. Charles Wake is most likely not going to play this week. He's week to week with a calf injury. Your first-round pick, another guy who hasn't really shown much, has been a disappointment thus far. And then Jonathan Woodard didn't practice again today. He's in a concussion protocol. He didn't practice Thursday, so it's leaning like he's not going to play. So it's likely they'll be down 2 defensive ends. Andre Branch looks likely to play, so you're probably going to have, Cam Wake, Andre Branch, and Robert Quinn, and Cam Malvoy, University of Houston grad, go Cougs, as your 4 defensive ends, which, gives you a decent amount, not as much as you want, but enough to get by. Let's see. Brandon, good question, Brandon. Perspective on the beer issue with Tyreek Hill and the Pats. Okay, so let's put this as simple as possible. I've always had a very interesting relationship with Boston. I haven't always felt that was the best sports town. For me, I've had sort of experiences where you don't always feel welcome there if you look like a certain way. So I immediately saw the Tyreek Hill thing and wondered how that would have interacted if that was maybe Travis Kelsey going into the bench. Um, so I know that there's fans that are drunk all the time. I know that there always can be, you're excited about your team, you get into other things, the middle finger comes up, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff happens. I grew up, in a lot in the Philadelphia area. I went to some Eagles games. I've seen some crazy things from fans, so none of this stuff surprises me. But you gotta understand player space. You got to understand, players are people just like you. And when you start to disrespect players, throw beer on them, do different things where you start to question their humanity, you start to disrespect their humanity. I think that you are very opening yourself up, one, to be responded against. And we often criticize athletes for when they respond, when they knock phones out of fans' hands or push fans and do all the different things. Tyreek Hill could have swung on a dude, and I would have saw no problem on it. You pour beer on it, it's just like you in the street and some dude, pour beer on you. What happens if you're walking down the street and some dude pour beer on you? You're gonna move and turn around? I mean, that's the ideal, the smart, the sort of civil way to go about it. But honestly, that's not how you or I would think that a situation like that would be okay to handle. So I think that good on the police out there for prosecuting him. Good on the Patriots organization from banning him from the stadium. I think that is outrageous, and I think that Tyreek Hill, even though he's got his own off-the-field issues that had nothing to do with this situation, he has every right to be outraged on this. And players in general have often been treated as less than people because they are entertainment for us. So I think that it was extra frustrating for me to watch, and I'm glad there's action sort of been taken for that. So I'll answer a few more questions. I'll give you guys my predictions, my X factors for this game, and then I'm going to go and watch some football. As always, thank you guys for joining. It's been a fun chat. You guys have been active. I've been trying to build this thing up, and I'm starting to see you guys really get interesting in this. So this is a fun thing for me. It's a fun way to sort of share my thoughts on the league, my thoughts and commentary, raw thoughts. So yeah, it's been a Brock eventful session. So a few more questions. Hey mom, how you doing? Jason, Brock Bowl in February. I'd hold off on those tickets a little bit. Felipe's asking, what kind of injury is Tannehill hiding that's keeping him out like this? I've always heard that there's if you follow baseball, there's often an injury called UCL or Tommy John surgery that happens when you overthrow with a baseball with a certain velocity. That typically doesn't happen in football because of the throwing mechanics is different than it is in baseball. And immediately when I heard Adam Gase say unusual, I was like, I wonder if it's something similar to that. Obviously we don't have any confirmation. Adam Gase cited the HIPAA laws incorrectly. That's not the way HIPAA works, first of all. People who saw Adam Gase say that I can't say this because of HIPAA, that's not the way HIPAA works. You have to be a medical professional for HIPAA to even go into consideration. Either way, that's not the point here. I think that, like I said, my best assumption, and I don't have full confirmation, so I'm not going to report this either way, but my assumption that there's something going on with either his labrum or his rotator cuff, whether it's just a strain, whether it's a partial tear. It's something in there because even in practice, we haven't been able to see him lift his arm to a certain area. So I think that they obviously didn't find something that was a full destructive period. I don't think it's as bad as the Andrew Luck situation where he had to have multiple surgeries. The Dolphins said that he's not going to have surgery. So it's a really odd period because he was just playing and practicing as a full participant on Wednesday and Thursday. So it's something that worsened. So my thought is that, this is something that's possibly a minor tear, possibly just a significant strain or sprain. And this is just speculation by me not reporting, just sort of educated speculation on what I think is going on for him. So that's my best thought on that. And we may never know what it fully was, but that's for them saying rest, I think that's sort of their optimistic hope that, hey, we wait past this game against the Lions, we wait past this game against the Texans, things go well, and then he's back to normal. But I've seen multiple times where it doesn't happen that way. John Ross had a situation last year with his shoulder where they hoped that he was going to be okay, and he ended up ending on IR. So I don't want to put any red flags out there, but I've seen it a few times with shoulders where they don't get better just by resting. So that's one thing to watch out for Tannehill. Their hope is to get him back sometime in early November, but be cautious and keep your eyes out because there's no guarantee that he's back in the timetable that they may hope. Jason Wedgwood is asking, how is Kenyan Drake's mindset heading into this week's game? I believe he wants to have a huge game. Kenyan Drake's been interesting because last week, as if you watched as Dolphins fans, he had a very busy and up and down game. He actually played pretty decent as a receiving back, and then he had that fumble on the goal line. He was very despondent on the sideline. Running back coach Eric Studesville and Frank Gore had to lift him off the ground after the game because he was crying because sort of he went from sort of the loser of that game, the guy who lost in the game, to the guy who was sort of saved by the game-winning kick. So I think Kenyan Drake is probably has a lot of things going on in his mind. He hasn't been in the locker room a lot. He's sort of been kind of dodging us in the media over the last few weeks, and I'm sure there's a lot of things going on in his mind as far as sharing the workload with Frank Gore. Frank Gore has essentially become the lead running back, and then Kenyan Drake has sort of become a complimentary back and a receiving back. That's not how he intended this going, and he's not playing as well as he would hope. So I think there's probably a lot of frustration with what the situation is in his mind and what he is producing on the field. But he's trying not to show that. He's trying to be a team guy. And the best way to sort of turn that around, like you mentioned, is for him to explode. And I'll tell you what, I think this is a big Frank Gore and Kenyan Drake game. And quickly to briefly say one of my X factors is going to be the entire Dolphins interior offensive line from Travis Swanson to Jesse Davis to Ted Larson, because this Detroit Lions defense is 30th in the NFL in rushing. They've been giving up, nearly 160 rushing yards a game, which is a bundle. So this is a perfect game down in that heat, down in that South Florida heat. I had a lot of people down from Chicago that I talked to out in that area, and they said it was exhausting. The heat index was over 100. It's probably going to be similar this week. So Frank Gore, Kenyan Drake, expect them to sort of carry the load. And I think this could be a real bounce back week for Kenyan Drake to get his spirits back up after what has been a rough and rocky couple of weeks. So that's my thought on that. Greg, thank you for the compliment. You offer great perspective, a joy to watch. Thanks you guys. I've been doing this since my Tennessee days, covering the beat, but obviously it's a new audience here. A lot of Dolphins questions. I try to talk about anything I know about. I have my contacts throughout the NFL, so I'll talk some NFL. But as always, I'm a Dolphins and NFL reporter, so I expect a lot of Dolphins questions. For Dolphins fans, I can get in the weeds with you. I can talk a lot of things, or we can talk big picture. It's whatever you guys want. And that's sort of how we'll shift this chat. My prediction for this week, 24-23 Dolphins. I actually have them winning this week. I think that, like I mentioned, Frank Gore and Kenyan Drake in combination could really create some things that Detroit has trouble with. I think getting Bobby McCain back will be huge because Detroit has three really talented receivers, and Golden Tate, Kenny Golladay, and Marvin Jones, and those three will be really, really tough to go against. And I think that's one of my second X factor is going to be Cordrea, or actually we'll do Cordrea Tankersley. He's a guy who has really been missing from the Dolphins defense over the last 5 weeks. He ended up getting a boost up because Torrey McTyer was so bad in coverage last week, and now he's the Dolphins' number 3 corner. Bobby McCain will be back this week. We don't know if he's going to be able to see a full load yet, but Torrey McTyer is number 3 corner, so he's going to play quite a bit. Like I mentioned, those receivers are one of the best trios in the NFL. They'll see a lot of 3-wide sets. You'll probably see some 4-wide sets. They're going to try to figure out who's the weak link on this defense. They're not throwing at X. Xavier Howard, he's the best cornerback on the Dolphins team. Bobby McCain is a really solid slot corner and the guy who's playing pretty well. So look at Cordrea Tankersley as a guy they try to expose. How does Cordrea respond? He was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago. He's got to be able to play well and hold his own so defenses can't pick on him like the little kid on the back of the bus. So I think that's what we got to see from Tankersley. He's my second X factor. And then my third X factor is Danny Amendola. He's a guy who sort of gets lost in the weed because he's not making the big plays that Albert Wilson's making. He's not making the big plays, the yak that Albert Wilson's making, or the big deep throws like Jakeem Grant or Kenny Stills. But Danny Amendola makes the tough grabs, and I think there's going to be a one play, maybe two plays this week where Danny Amendola is going to have to make a key grab on third down to keep a drive going from Brock Osweiler. And I think whether he does it or not is going to determine whether the Lions or the Dolphins are going to win this game. So those are my 3 X factors. Those are my predictions. I answered a couple questions. Let's get out of here. All right. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Shean Sobani. Hopefully I pronounced that right. If I did not, apologize. Who would you expect to return for Parker? I suggested the 6th round pick. I think that's what I would ask for if I were the Dolphins. There's probably still some potential. I hate that word. Potential in Devontae Parker because he was a 1st round pick in 2015. Maybe you get a team like Tennessee, Titans fans, or Dallas who need a receiver to bite on that. So that's sort of what I'm thinking for Devontae Parker. And yeah, I think that's it. What we got question-wise. Thank you guys as always for joining. Enjoy some football. Subscribe to my page. Share my YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share with your friends. And I'll see you guys here back next week. Have a Brocktastic weekend.